No, we're starting with HR. So right now, 4:15, we'll call the HR committee to order. Mr. Swirsky, do you have anything to say on the... Any comments on the staffing?
Okay, we still have some placeholders out there that will come off after this meeting for the action items. Not that many this time, actually. Any questions on the just on the staffing report?
Good.
This is just a general question, not specifically to the staffing report, but about the process of hiring. Is there any real reason that the school board members are left off of any of the new position hiring announcements or asks to hire? I think we would be great advocates to reach out to our community to recruit people to come to our district and apply if we knew what positions were open. Currently, I don't receive the new positions that are posted.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they go out. I thought they went out to all ISD 709, all of the positions that are posted.
I've never gotten them once in my almost 3.5 years.
Maybe I get them because of my positions.
No, I think it's an all ISD 709, but I'll check. I will check on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we do that for certified and non-certified. So,
well,
not that you should have to search on.
Right.
You could just go to the mine's on.
Oh. Yeah.
You could just go to the HR website and it just opens up to job openings. I mean, not that. I mean, it would be nice if you got the same email that ISD 709 people get, but just going to HR and going to job openings would see that too.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll check. So you should be on that list.
I would. I shut mine off.
Thank you. I would go to HR, but I would have to go to HR every day, and I don't really want to do that because I don't know when things come out. Like, I understand there's a position that was just posted yesterday that I had no idea about. So, thank you. I appreciate being included.
So I just comment that not all the positions that you see would be seen coming through are new, that many of those, especially in the para or the food service, are probably moving around, and you could see that also within the maintenance, transportation less likely, but you will see a lot of them that come through, and people are always saying, gosh, we're hiring a lot of all these external people, but it's because you have a para that takes a different job, or you have a food service that moves to a new location. So not all of them are new.
Anything else? Okay. Next we'll go on to new policies. This is the second reading for the employment background checks. Any comments on that? Go ahead.
I have a comment, and I'm not really sure how to talk about it. But in the procedures about that the school district will only do a criminal background check right before an offer of employment, I believe we had a discussion about that, and I know that other board members wanted to see that changed as well as I do, that we do background checks during the application process and not later after the interviews. I don't know. I can't speak for them because they're not here, but I would hope that they would reach out and voice their concerns too.
There is a cost for doing background checks, and the district is prohibited from paying for those. They do have to come out from the individuals who we hire, and right now we have it arranged so it comes out of their first paycheck. Other than that, they have to either give us $20 or a check for $20. I think that would be detrimental to our hiring process to have $20 just to get into the game.
I would agree with that. Is that by state law?
Yes.
And so we're absolutely prohibited from it, or that it's just saying that the employee can incur the cost?
No, we're prohibited for paying for the background checks. Now, in some cases, like for volunteers and that, we might have a booster group that goes out there and raises money that will pay for it for the volunteers, but as a school district, we cannot pay for that. We cannot incur that cost.
Well, I believe that our system is flawed in a way that I don't believe this policy is correcting it, and I really wish the other board members were here to discuss their ideas too. So I would hope that that they'll be able to provide feedback at next week's meeting and perhaps postpone the second reading of this, because I believe that we should correct where we see flaws. So.
And I don't see it that way at all. I guess I agree with our human resource director that the amount of hires we do and how many we interview, it could do a couple of things. It might deter us from interviewing as many candidates. I've sat on interview committees where if there's one position, we've interviewed as many as 8 candidates because they all looked like they could potentially be good. And I think if we as a board make this a mandatory, I don't even know how you would do that. I mean, unless the candidate is willing to pay for that background check. And then like Tim said, that when it's not the practice of any other board, we might see it as an issue, but there's other ways we might go around that. Like we might very well do a background check on the candidate that comes out as the top candidate, and then have some conversation with human resource and see if there's a policy you want to craft about where that goes from there before that actual contract then gets approved, where you might want to do that. So it would kind of address some of the issues that I think you're referring to, but doesn't put that burden of a background check. I don't think that's the answer to the issue that you are thinking needs to happen. So I would just offer that as well. And again, just kind of, I know there's not a, this is a committee meeting. This is where we discuss our ideas and our things. I would hope that next week on a Tuesday night board meeting that a couple things, we could just pull this because it's in the second reading and we just maybe want to have more conversation, but I would hope that, I don't think we're prepared to have an informed conversation at Tuesday night's board meeting about where we could go to solve the problem until we have more working sessions, which is what I call this, and then come. So I would suggest we pull it from the agenda, much like we did on whatever policy we're looking at yesterday, so that it doesn't have to be a conversation when we're not all ready to have the conversation. Then we kind of, I don't know. Do you see where I'm coming from? Where absolutely. I don't think I would be as wanting to, to work it out and to have the session where we're listening and coming up with ideas on a Tuesday night board meeting. Mm-hmm. This is where I want it. So if we just pull it and then put it on next month's working agenda, I'd like to, and then it would give me and our other former board members time to reach out and read other school districts' policies, talk with other representatives, have more conversation with Tim. Tim can come back better prepared to kind of offer some ideas. That might work. That's at least my.
And that's how I ended my statement, is that it might not end up being when background checks are done, but how that information is conveyed. So, and I agree, but we still have to vote on it to postpone it. So.
I'd just like to comment that as you're thinking about it, think about the timing of a background check. So a background check isn't an instantaneous process. We have to send it down to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. It takes sometimes up to 2 weeks to receive it back. So if we're going to hold off interviews or if we're going to do it in an application process, it might slow the hiring processes. And then recently we've seen an uptick in the number of background checks in which we get information back that requires us to have the person have fingerprints completed. And that's for such things as common last names and common first names, parent-child with similar names and or very similar names, and so they're looking to make sure that they have the right person they're reporting on, and that can take an additional 2 to 3 weeks. So just to offer that timeline up for you as you have those discussions, I just think that would be important and part of those discussions.
Thanks. Anything else?
One other thing that Member Oswald had brought to my attention is the policy number. The new policy number is 404, and on the first page of page 4, it starts out 1404, and we'll need to change that. That's just a typo. I would also mention that the state allows us to make those position offers contingent on a background check as well, and I think that's done so it does not hold up the process also.
All right. How about new policy 407, first reading, employees' right to know exposure to hazardous substances.
Which is, where are we? They're the right to know, yes. So what we are doing is we are replacing our previous policy 4041 with, this is the MSBA policy 407.
What training do we give now?
Essentially, there's some video training and there's some manager training that takes place, and it's primarily within the maintenance unit in terms of they're the unit that are most likely to be working with the types of materials that would be covered here.
Any questions or comments on that? I do note that I bought a pair of gloves to protect from something, and it said on there that the state of California says it contained cancer-causing. I mean, everything does, no matter what it's for, it seems like. All right. No other comments on new policy 407. Will be first reading then. Informational items, upcoming district requirements and displacements. HR informational items. We have district retirements on the certified side where we ask that they notify us by April 1st. Right now, on the teaching side anyways, we're anticipating about the same amount of retirements as last year. I believe it was like 32 to 36 or so. And then displacements, these are not to be confused with layoffs. Displacements for both certified and non-certified are positions of which people still remain members, but they don't have a right to that position for the following year. So our temporary teachers that we have that took positions for teaching positions that were not posted mid-year, we'll repost those for the following year. Those teachers stay within the unit and are eligible to reapply. Some of our 24-hour postings that we have on the teaching side, so if we only put the posting up for one day and they took that has to get reposted again the next year, so they're displaced from that. Temporary positions within the paraprofessionals or positions that may have been taken after a certain date.
Yeah, those aren't considered displacements. Temporary positions are not displacements, but they do remain in the union and can apply as an internal candidate. Yeah. And in the displacements would be such things as grant-funded positions, parapositions in our preschool. There's some of those. It's a 2-year cycle on the grants normally, so sometimes they don't know if they're getting the grant award, so you'll see some displacements there. And then as we have child-specific students moving from elementary to middle to high school or the various changes of schools, those require displacements, and so there's a few that happen in those regards too.
Take one and then.
Any comments? All right. Next,
these two.
Nepotism discussion.
Yeah. We're kind of. I don't want to jump back and forth between business and human resources, but
we were asked to take a look at the nepotism policy as how it applies to our conflict of interest policy. And as I researched that and looked through it, and Linda and I sat down and discussed it, they are two separate entities where the conflict of interest statements, not only for the one that we're putting out there for a second reading, as well as other ones that I read, basically had to do with more fiduciary type situations where you can't enhance your financial gains through a conflict of interest, either through people you know are in the know or relatives or those types of things. The nepotism is more of an employment type of policy or procedure in terms of reporting structures and hiring and it's possible to have a conflict of interest that way, but putting people in positions as a result of your through nepotism or relationships. So what I've just handed out to you are two different things. One is the nepotism policy that the St. Louis County is considering, in which they've actually voted to table at this point in time. And the other one is a kind of a list of other nepotism policies or procedures that I pulled off the internet. And the reason I wanted to have a discussion on this is nepotism can be anything from a very strict up and down vertical type structure where there's absolutely no relationship in that structure to another point would be where you can have relationships in that structure, but you put certain procedures in there that kind of disrupt who would hire, who might give a review, who might supervise. And I think it's, in the examples I handed out and to that, they kind of run the gambit. The district does have a history of spouses and relationships working in the district. And a very strict nepotism policy, if it were enacted, would impact some of our relationships that we have, working relationships that we have out in the district now. If I had to make a recommendation, I would say, and this is somewhat what we've been doing through history without a nepotism policy, is we have some form of structure in our policy that provides for other types of supervisions or reviews of that individual and taking them out of some of that hiring process. So I wouldn't recommend a very strict vertical type procedure. I would have more of an open type procedure that would prohibit certain types of reporting relationships and reviewing relationships.
I appreciate that insight, because even this is from the Minneapolis School District's handbook on nepotism too. It says their nepotism policy is defined as an employee shall not be assigned, reassigned, permanently or temporarily employed, or issued an independent contract in a department, a special program, a location, or school where one member of a family has direct administrative or supervisory responsibility over that employee. And I think we've probably adhered to that on just a hiring practice, but putting it in a policy is probably a good idea. And as I researched too, it seems like just in the last 3 years, the nepotism policy has surfaced in school districts. It's been a part, I think, of other government agencies. But as I've looked at Lakeville, South St. Paul, Roseville, and the Minneapolis, they've all looked at it just recently. And it's pretty much along the lines that you are, maybe guiding us as we work. But this is another one like the conflict of interest one where I really look forward to robust conversation before we actually, craft a policy. But the policies of the other districts, don't look overwhelmingly, strict we're not a small district by any means, but we aren't a large district either. So one of the things both in the conflict of interest policy and in a nepotism policy, because I think you've probably, in this packet you gave us too, there's some pitfalls that you can get into pretty quickly without really like unintended consequences when we put together a policy that might be it looks good to us until we get into a scenario where we're violating it and we really didn't want to, nor did we need to, but we crafted a policy that almost demands that we do. And boy, I'd like to make sure we're not doing that as well. But thank you.
I just want to be as transparent as possible about any potential views from outside community that knows that, and thinks or heard or whatever, that, we've stated it clearly, and I don't want to read a reader column again that points all of these things out for us. I'd rather have it be there so we can say, yeah, here it is. I do often wonder when we attract new employees sometimes, and then all of a sudden their spouse has a job too. How does that fit into recruitment strategies that we're getting 2-for-1 deals?
I wouldn't say it's a very strict recruitment strategy, but wondering what spouses do and if we need them for a para position or other positions or another teaching position. We've looked at that. We do have some benefits that are in our system in terms of a 2-employee family with their health insurance, which is a nice benefit for them. So we are not exactly, with a benefit like that, discouraging those types of relationships. You also have the situation that, again, as you're mentioning, you might have people who are hired separately and then, due to a relationship, become a 2-employee type family, and then so you enter into those types of situations. Again, I think it's important. In the policies that I was reading, it does talk about, in the event of a situation like that supervisors are notified. There's a responsibility on the individuals to notify supervisors of the potential for that conflict in a nepotism or relationship, and then but it also goes on usually to say that the district will make efforts in order to maintain their employment and relationships. One thing that I think I would also like, and this is for myself to research on here, is I don't know the impact of contracts. Would a policy trump a contract that would say you can apply for a position in this building and your spouse happens to be the principal of that building, for instance, or in some capacity. So that's another area I would like to explore.
I agree, and thank you. And this, I see this discussion not in any way punitive towards anyone. I think it's more saying this is what's happening, and we're aware of it, and we are operating it, and we're conscious of it, and we're going to do our best. I mean, that's essentially what we need to do, and to build trust within our community, to let them know ahead of time that yes, we know about it, not for them to come to us and go, did you know about it? And then we say it. That's too late to the game. So I appreciate the thoughts into this, and I definitely would love to hear about that contract answer. I hadn't thought about that, but that's very intriguing.
Mm-hmm. I thank you for that input too. And again, I want to comment too about, I don't appreciate when our local media takes the issue of this and then kind of creates their own definition and then kind of lays it out there as if this is nepotism, when the definition, by the legal definition, is that it's a practice showing favoritism by the CEO or administrative to a family member or friend. And so I think that some of the things pointed out in local media were misleading. And to my knowledge, many of those in positions in our district were not hired by their relative or brother-in-law. And so we have to be careful. And we have to look at how we're going to craft the definition, because there's other ones too, and it says that nepotism isn't necessarily a bad thing. While receiving, that simply being a friend or relative of people in power doesn't take away from someone's qualifications. And so we have to be careful about that too. If we go with that strict definition, we might very well find that we can't fill a position. We have many positions in our district that sometimes are hard to fill, especially in our SPED programs and our ASD Level 3 programs, that
we don't want to prohibit hiring a qualified candidate just because of that relation. And sometimes we have to just, backtrack on that. But again, I think with your leadership, Tim, and our board work, we can come to a really good policy, and I look forward to that too. It's good stuff. And so I appreciate that.
Anything else? All right, I think we can save this for digesting it and then talking about it later. All right, any other opinions, things people have to say? If not, then I'll conclude the HR business for today.
And I'll pick up with the business committee meeting starting. I just want to say that Member Trinka is excused and would love to be here but can't. And Superintendent Gronseth may be walking in a bit late. Last I knew he would be arriving around 5:10, but depending on the snow he's just encountered, it might be a little bit later than that. So I'm here to run the show otherwise, and I hope we have a great discussion. While we get busy, I also have to mention that we have to be done by 6 o'clock. That's in about an hour and 45 minutes, or hour and 15 minutes. Sorry, I can't tell time, I guess. Because of elections somewhere that I'm not a part of, but I know are existing. So welcome, Mr. Spooner, and welcome, Ms. Blaylock, and if you don't mind, I'll just ask if there's anything you want to comment significant about our numbers and investment activities.
Our financial statements are pretty standard. They're for the month of January and then year to date. I did think we were going to change the schedule a little bit. Jason, we have a presentation from Marsh and McClellan, and then following that from Baird. So I know they're on kind of a time schedule. So I don't have anything else on the financial part to point out.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I knew it would be quick. That's all. And I wanted them to be able to get ready. So first up, we have a presentation about workers' compensation from our firm Marsh & McClellan. And we have Bob St. Arnold that is going to be on the phone with us. And Jason, I'm sorry, I never knew your name, but it's just Jason, apparently, Mr. Jason. And they're going to be doing a presentation, and I hope we've all seen what we need to see. So,
hi, Bob. We're going to put you on speakerphone. Hold on. Okay, will you say something for us so we can see if we can hear you?
Hello, I hope you can hear me okay.
Okay, that's a yes.
Okay. Terrific.
All right, so we're ready, and take it away.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk with the business committee. We wanted to share some workers' compensation claims data with you to kind of give you an update on how the district is performing, share what we're seeing as a spike in claims activity and what the financial impact of that will be to the district. And then also I've got my colleague with me, Alana Sukla. Alana performs loss control and safety services for our clients, and Alana works with me in our Duluth office, and she's a terrific resource for our clients. And I apologize, I'm getting a little bit of reverb, so if you hear some delay on my end, I just have to kind of let that reverb go. But after we talk a little bit about the loss control and the safety services that we're going to provide the district to hopefully begin to turn this around a little bit, we also have some solutions from your workers' comp carrier, RAS, on what we can do to help with an increase in injuries that we're seeing with the para professionals. So in front of you, hopefully you have our slide presentation, and I'm just going to pull that up real quick on my end. The first slide just kind of shows you the claim activity that we've had since 2012. Just a minute here. I have to kind of pull that back up on my end. Okay. This just shows you from 2012 through 2018 the dollar value of claims. You can see we were kind of rolling along from 2012 to 2016. Our first year was about $413,000 in claim dollars paid for workers' compensation. But you can see the spike that we had for the 2017 claims year. A year ago, those claims were valued at $286,000. As of January 31st of 2019, those claims are now valued in excess of $961,000. So we've just had a kind of a spike in claim activity for that 1 year. That year is entering into your premium calculation for the first time. So the district is going to see a spike in work comp premium for the August 1, 2019 to 2020 year. And I'll kind of show you what that will look like here shortly. This is just the second graph here, shows you a point-in-time analysis. This really just shows you how claims develop over the course of the year. You can see back in 2012, when we value those losses, they're now all closed out at $413,000 in value. But for that 2017 accident year, when those losses were valued on January 17th, 2018, they were valued at $286,000, but they have spiked to over $961,000. The good news is that the year that we're in right now, the 2018 year, we do have a very good claims year going on with only $72,000 paid out so far. So this next slide that shows your experience mod by policy year. When your experience rating or your experience mod is below 1.0, you're basically performing better than average, better than the average school district. And you can see in the 2014 year, you had a 0.97 mod. Right now, in the current year that we're in, the experience mod is 119. The district is paying approximately about $520,000. We're roughly $521,000 in work comp premium for the year that we're in right now. If that experience mod had elevated to 1.54, the premium would have went up by about $144,000. You would have been looking at a premium this next year in excess of $664,000. But what we do, we meet with the district on a quarterly basis to review all of your losses. We were able to make an impact on 2 or 3 of the claims to bring the reserves down, and in doing so, next year's experience mod is actually going to be 1.42. So because of those claim reviews that our team is doing with the district, that $664,000 premium is actually going to be about $615,000. So even though the premium's going to go up, and it's going to be going up by about $95,000 this next year, it could have been worse if we weren't doing that claims advocacy that has been working for the school district and for MMA. This next slide, I kind of wanted to show you where the claims are occurring by department, what professions we're seeing the injuries occur in. This is just data that shows you going back to 2012, the number of claims that we've had by department. You can see that about 40% of our claims, or about 430 of the 1,000 claims that we had, occurred with the paraprofessionals. And teachers represented the second highest category. Your custodians or your maintenance or buildings and grounds folks constituted about 107 injuries. And you can see the other occupations that are identified there. The fourth slide, I think, what we're trying to just kind of show you are the types of claims that we're seeing. The highest category with 499 injuries is the category struck by. That could be struck by a foreign item, or it could be a student with challenging behavior that strikes a teacher. Slips and falls are a big category. Strains are a big category. So we wanted to give you an idea of the actual types of claims that we're seeing. So that just is a real high-level overview of what we're seeing right now. The next slide is what are we going to do about it? What can we do, or what resources can Marsh deploy to try to help improve the overall safety initiatives that are taking place at the district? And Alana, could you speak to this?
This is Jason. I can speak to that, Bob, today. So.
Okay.
So just some of the initiatives we're taking, and Marsh and Alana, who's sitting on the side over there, is assisting with that, as well as just the revitalization of the district-wide safety committee. That's a committee of several of the leadership staff or employees from the different unions that get together and discuss these types of numbers and bring it back to the different buildings, so we can relay that information and then start to get feedback on what we can do about some of these injuries that we're seeing, trying to get that information out there a little better. And Alana's assisting, trying to lead and coordinate those meetings with me. Slip, trip, and fall audits of the schools. This is something that we've gone out to the different, all the different buildings to do an audit of what is actually out there. That's a very time-consuming event, and Alana's actually been the one that's doing that, taking her time to go out and creating reports for that. We've got, I think, most of the reports done, kind of waiting until we get them all in so we can tally the data and get some feedback on what we're seeing. Is it wet surfaces? Is it we don't have enough rugs out there, that type of stuff. Which leads into the next one, which is an entrance walk-off matting survey. Dylan Carlson, our office, is working on that one, just to try to figure out why are we seeing slips and falls in the buildings. We see them outside of the buildings because of ice and water, which we want to improve that as well through facilities and maybe some salting, sanding procedures, whatever on that end of it. But we have to see, why are we getting water in the building in the first place? Do we not have enough matting at the doorways, or is there spills, that type of stuff? So we're taking that step to kind of analyze that. And then just looking at our workers' compensation reporting process, making sure people are informed on how to report and when to report, what to report, so we can get a little bit better idea and better jump on these claims as they come in, and we're aware of them, as they occur, rather than sometime down the road. The next slide, we have just a quick slide on loss control opportunities. So that last slide was things we're actually doing or in progress right now. The next ones are some of the ideas and things we've come up with that can potentially have an effect on these numbers as well. So the increased employee safety training, possibly doing some specialized training for different groups. Part of that we're able to break out our groups a little bit better just by having the payroll system redone in the last year or two, whenever you guys did that. I don't recall exactly. And we can break out groups for our online training better, so now we're able to give different training to different groups a little more efficiently. So we need to assign those that way. Cost of risk, how to claim financial impacts by the district. I'm actually not sure. I think Alana put that one on there. I think it was just analyzing the risk, especially like in the safety committee meetings, that type of stuff. Make sure we understand, get information out there to the right people. Safety orientation for new hires is another one we would like to look at in the whether it's this year or for next year. Just getting, again, people oriented with safety, making sure they understand the reporting procedures and how workers' compensation works, so then we can manage those claims better. Anytime you can manage a claim right from the start, you're going to reduce those costs typically, is what you see. We'll do some transportation department safety audit systems. One of the slides showed that maintenance was the highest cost from 2014 to current at $684,000 plus. Just this year alone, transportation had 240 some thousand out of that department this past year, just from actually 2 injuries. So we're really taking a hard look at transportation, seeing what that is, who it is, what's happening, where are those injuries occurring and why. Increased frequency of the safety committee meetings. We talked about that. And then just writing some safety program updates to make sure that our programs are matching what the requirements are, and then of course, in turn keeping people safe in that manner so that getting hurt on the job. I think the other thing we've done is also increase some principal communications as well. I know we've been at 1 or 2 principal meetings now just talking about safety and contacting principals a little bit more closely on some of the more complex claims that we've had. And some of the stuff I'm talking about here, we've started to see, as Bob said, we're starting to see some of the results of that. You can see it that the latest numbers was $72,000 versus that $900,000+. That's, we're 7 months into the policy year. We've got 5 months to go, but 2 of those are summer months where we don't really have anybody here. So really we got 3 months of school left, and we're at 72,000. We're sitting pretty good. It's going to go up, but compared to the 17-18 season, which was absolutely terrible, we're doing pretty well, and we're focusing on these injuries the best we can. The next slide, it's a lot of information here. I'm not going to go too far into it, but RAS is our workers' compensation insurer, and through Marsh and RAS, we were made aware of this, that RAS has a program to help reduce basically injuries from student behaviors. So student-related injuries, the striking and hitting and that kind of stuff. They have a program and a couple of specialists that work for RAS that are creating videos and training. A little different than like a CPI training for holds and stuff. So it deals more on the behavioral side and almost the preventative measures before you have to do a hold or something like that. So it's really focusing on behaviors and how we can potentially teach our employees some of the recognition from that prior to having to do a hold. So Tricia Parrish with RAS, she's a sensory processing specialist. She's working with myself and Alana and Jason Crane on this to see if it's something we can even implement at some level as early as next fall. That's a potential, but we just don't know where it's going to quite go yet. So that was the next 2 slides there. The last slide we have, I always like to throw out the barriers that we have too, because we have a lot of great ideas and just time for the training that I talked about. It's very hard to get time to train individual groups, especially the teachers group. They're the only group that I haven't addressed since I've been with the district regarding workers' compensation. I think I've hit every other group on the day back of school to talk about workers' comp and injuries and stuff, and still gotta get my claws on that one. So injury follow-up, including investigations and corrective measures. This is one that's probably the most time consuming when we have the least amount of resources to do. Again, like I said, in my experience, the closer and quicker you can follow up on claim and the more actively involved you can get with that employee, the more likely it's going to reduce your costs. And that's just not really an area that we found we have, between myself and HR, have a lot of time to invest in. It's been kind of a large barrier as far as that goes. Another one that I saw in the 2017-18 season where we saw increased costs was actually, I talk about here, offsite programs and new programs with students. So when we have new programs you're starting to involve students in, whether it's some kind of a forestry program or offsite program, or you have more employees going offsite, right, to do home visits and stuff. We had like 3 or 4 major injuries last year, in the last year and a half, that attributed to those rising costs for these things that maybe we need to look at the safety side a little closer first for. And then just doing audits and building audits and department audits. Again, we're getting some outside assistance for that now, which is good, and I just think we need to continue on that path as far as that goes. So like Bob said, he gave you some numbers on where we're at, just so we are aware that we had kind of a rough year and we're trying to get back on track with some of the programs we have here. And then there's some more work to do.
Thank you for all that. Thank you. Thank you for all that explanation. What question? Member Lowfall, do you have a question?
Well, that's right. I thought you. This is really good information, and for my time spent, all the time I've spent in the district, and I can remember the safety presentation we used to have on the first day of school. We used to do that on a fairly regular basis, and sometimes I think maybe now I should go back out there as a school board member and share that safety information, because I think when we're there as teachers, we just kind of didn't pay attention as much. We're so interested in getting to our classrooms and getting set up for the first day. So just all of this from this side of the table is, makes sense to me. Some of the things like the matting that comes into the building, I think our maintenance crew is really good at it, but it wears on the edges and your foot will catch on the edge, and then they duct tape it, and then the duct tape kind of gets more. So, I know, it's just, but we don't have a lot of staff to go out and do all of that stuff. Or I even thought, because this kind of happened to me, but I didn't file a claim or anything, but is we have those new water machines that you can put your water underneath and fill. But what that does is cause a lot of water spillage down the hall. And just think about it, actually, when you think about it, there's just so much increased water drinking by our students in the high school especially, that our hallways are wet a lot. Because kids are, that's a good, healthy thing that they're drinking a lot of water, but they carry big jugs around and they constantly are filling them up with the machine, and then that drips into the hallway. So that's just really kind of an aha moment for me. And again, I also, work in our most challenging student classrooms, and those are on the rise. We have more students that we work with and engage with behaviors that are sometimes a struggle. And so, the focus on increased time with trainings is probably a good thing, but thank you.
Just seeing the number of incidents impacting paraprofessionals, really caught my attention, and the fact that we might have some resources to provide them some training to reduce these incidents, I think, is a very positive thing. And hearing from paraprofessionals themselves, their representation, those opportunities for training would be very much appreciated. So I hope we can find a way to make that work.
And I had a question, Mr. Barsness, that you said earlier, the earlier you can get involved with an employee after an injury, it reduces the cost. Can you tell me how that happens?
Employees in the state of Minnesota have the right to go to any doctor or facility they see fit, which often means they'll go to their chiropractor and 10 days later we find out about it. So we are already paying for something that we don't even know if it's the correct treatment or not. So if we can make sure we get the injuries very quickly, less than 24 hours, preferably turnaround time, and then get a call out to them, whether it's myself or an adjuster, if it's a claim that looks like it has some complexity to it, we can start to guide them to make sure they're getting the proper treatment for their injuries right away. And then they don't go out and go get treatment in one area and maybe off the turnaround and go get a whole nother treatment somewhere else later, or that they're not. The other part is the return to work program. So they're not going out to a personal doctor and they're just taking them off work, and we get a note that says they're off work for 10 days. Once we get the note, it's very hard to go back and say, no, but we have return to work, we have restrict or light duty work we can have them do. They can be here where we're still getting production out of them, I guess you could say, and they're getting paid too, but they don't have to be off work. We have other opportunities for them, and that reduces the claim cost.
Thank you for that.
And one thing that I would add, Jason, the data that I have in front of me, about 81% of the claims get reported within 3 days, which is very good. 5 years ago, it was about 65% that were getting reported within 3 days. So that culture, that has gotten better as far as getting the claims reported on time.
Thank you for that insight. I think that's good news anyway. And I just wanted to add another comment about the wet floors and things that, it's not just the matting that can cause a fall. It can be the floor itself, because our janitors and our custodians and maintenance people pride themselves on those shiny floors, and I think they look great too. But I know I'm going to fall if I have anything wet on my shoes. So I don't know what the perfect solution is for that. Maybe a different wax, I don't know, but there's got to be safety standards with that too, and I'll leave that all up to you. So any other questions?
I have one.
Oh,
the reason for the spike in 2017 wasn't clear. Is that total number of incidents were up, or were there a few incidents that cost a lot more?
Actually, the total number of incidents reported really stayed fairly much the same. It's just the severity really took a jump. The severity of the injuries took a really high spike, and I could talk a lot more about that, but to keep it short, it was kind of all over. There were some slips, there were some other injuries that were really costly, and the severity ended up having a lot of days off. So our number of days off tripled, as well as the cost here. So that anytime people have time off, we have to, of course, you're paid for your time off, and we have to replace you. So.
Is most of the cost due to medical payments, or is it more time off that you're compensating for? In general,
to give you a general answer, typically you like to see the medical being the payment and keep people working, and I think we've done a good job until that 17-18 season. I can only remember what I glanced at today, and it was, I would say, 60% medical and 40% indemnity time off. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it was a lot higher than I anticipated when I just did a quick summation on a spreadsheet. Okay. We like to have that return to work program working for us, and the doctors had a tendency now in the last year or so to really take people off of work and not give us the opportunity to have them working under restrictions unless we have somebody that can go back and start challenging that, which RAS does have nurse case managers that we assign to cases that will go do that for us if we have a complex claim.
That's it.
I wondered about site-to-site breakdown. You didn't include that, but if that's something you see where you have more reports at particular buildings than others, and if that's something you're examining.
I look at that. I think over the years, it doesn't have a trend, is my generalization on that. 1 year a building will have a lot, and the next 2 years it might not have any. I don't know if I have ever seen a real trend of one building, other than my transportation concern, that for the number of people that we employ in transportation, it just seems like over the years they've had a really high workers' comp number. I attributed that to slip and falls because we see some especially this past year, really high claims for slip and falls. I say that until last night when I did a really in-depth study on it, and it was actually down to 1 or 2 employees. So it's hard we have to justify that out too. So it's just,
Jason, if I had one thing to add, I guess the thing I'm most excited about is having an opportunity to, I guess, address the low-hanging fruit, and that would be the injuries to paraprofessionals. That constitutes, 4 out of 10 work comp claims that the district has. And I think Jason Crane, while he does a great job, he just needs more frequent training in that department, and that sensory training that Teresa Parrish is going to offer. I think that really is a great program. I think that's going to have immediate impact.
And that opportunity to do more training with regard to, I think, sensory sensitive children has a much broader impact than just our workers' comp. So I hope that we can do that, and I hope we can make that accessible to anybody who would be relevant for in training next year.
There are no further questions. We're all good. Thank you, Mr. St. Arnold. I guess we're done for today.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Bye.
And we want to welcome Member Sandstead and Superintendent Groundseth have arrived, and I was remiss in excusing Member Loeffler-Kemp earlier. So we are all here and accounted for that plan to be. So moving on, we were going to talk with Mr. Rantapa,
yes. Good evening, everyone.
Yay. So it will take a minute for him to come in and set up so he can give us a presentation on the wall, apparently.
Well, thank you for the evening. I believe we're going to pull the information that I'm going to present up on a PowerPoint. While we're waiting for that to load, I will pass out hard copy handouts of the presentation and give a brief introduction of myself as well as my company, Baird. For those of you who don't know, the company Baird, we're an employee-owned firm that's coming up on 100 years old this summer. We have a global presence and are one of the largest purchasers of municipal bonds in the nation on a per-issue basis. Myself personally, I've had the opportunity to work in public finance for almost 10 years now. Have spent almost 7 of those specializing solely in assisting Minnesota school districts with bond issuance and capital planning. As you can see, the PowerPoint now is loaded up, as well as I believe everybody has the hard copy handouts. You'll notice the title of the first slide here is Summary of Potential Refunding and Restructuring Options. I'm going to go over 3 potential refundings of the district's existing debt issuances. One of which would be used to generate some stability in the general fund. The other 2 of which would look at reducing the tax levy for the debt service portion of 2 of those debt issuances. So with that, if we move to the next slide that's titled General Fund COPs. This is a reminder that the school district has 2 payment sources, essentially, for your outstanding debt issuances. One being the general fund, which I'm summarizing with this slide. You'll notice if we focus on the bottom bar, the title is the taxes payable year. So if we move to taxes payable 2019, that would have been for the levy that the district certified in December of 2018 for this year. Now keep in mind, the payments for these general fund certificates of participation are made solely from general fund and not a tax levy, but just wanted to give you the comparison for a timing standpoint. If we focus at the bottom portion of the slide, moving left to right, you'll notice the first debt issuance highlighted there is the certificates of participation series 2009B. That's the debt issuance that I'm gonna summarize a little later in the presentation as to that restructuring opportunity that would give some stability to the district's general fund. And that can be seen in the blue bars moving left to right. The red bars is the district's 2000D as in dog certificates of participation, and lastly the green bars on the top is the district's 2012B as in boy certificates of participation. You can see for taxes payable 2019 through taxes payable 29, the total payments for those three issuances range from about $3.4 million to $3.5 million, and then reduced to just shy of $500,000 in taxes payable 30 and 31. If we move to the next slide, you can see this is a summary of the district's outstanding debt issuances that are payable from tax levy. So once again, if we start with taxes payable, in 2019, you can see there's various debt issuances, general obligation bonds, as well as full-term certificates of participation that make up your debt levy side of the budget that's payable from your annual tax levy. If we focus solely on the bottom red bar here, is the taxable full-term certificates of participation series 2009A. That was the Build America bond issue. That's one of the potential refunding opportunities that I will summarize, as well as the full-term certificates of participation 2010C, which can be seen in the smaller green bar on top of the red in the bottom there. You'll notice final debt payment for the debt levy side of the budget is taxes payable in 2027 or fiscal year 2028. Feel free to interrupt me at any time if anyone has any questions regarding the slides. As we move forward, you'll notice there's a lot of information on this slide. I'll do my best to move through a high-level summary and not leave out any details. If we start in the top portion of the page under the assumptions category, you can see this slide is a summary of the refunding opportunity for the district's 2009A Build America bond issue, assuming a dated or closing date of June 1st of this year. The second assumption here in the assumption box you can see would refund the 2020 through 28 maturities, which are callable of those 2009A certificates. It would constitute what's called a current refunding. So these certificates were callable March 1st, 2019. I'm aware that the school board has been monitoring this refunding opportunity for quite some time. Rates are so favorable for savings with this issue. If we move to the last bullet point there, you'll notice assuming non-bank qualified borrowing rates. And I have here a Moody's BA2 underlying rating. I have to apologize. That's a typo. That should state BA1 is the district's rating for the full-term certificates of participation. If we move down to the bar graph that's titled fiscal year in the bottom, you'll see the old or your current debt service for the 2009A certificates can be seen in the gray bar. The blue bar represents what that debt service moves to based on current borrowing rates in the tax-exempt market. So you can see just exchanging, if we move over to the bar or the graph on the right, we're exchanging the higher existing interest rates for lower interest rates in the current tax-exempt market. Not extending the maturity, simply exchanging the old rates for the new lower rates. If we move to the bottom left corner, you can see that annual savings equates to about $180,000 a year, or a little over 1.6 million for the life of the refunding. If we move to the additional facts section in the bottom left corner, you'll notice the estimated par amount to refund this debt issuance is $42.1 million, with about $275,000 in costs of issuance. If we look at the time value of money, the net present value savings would be 2.97% for this debt issuance. If we look to the right, this is what's called a sensitivity analysis that shows the change in PV savings. If we look now, based on the current market, PV savings are about 1.4 million. If rates increase 0.1%, that goes down about 213,000. If they go up another 0.1%, that moves to 425,000. Just there to give an example of how interest rate movement in the market would affect the overall savings. Some of you are curious about what the rates are. You can see below that right bar graph, estimated yield for the new bonds ranges from 2% to 2.9, where the old ranges from 4.6 to 5.6. Some of you may wonder, why do these interest rates increase year as you go further out? The reason for that is the further out on the yield curve you go, there's a higher level of risk for investors to purchase the bonds or the certificates, therefore they require a higher rate of return further out on that yield curve. If we go to the next slide, format is very similar to the previous slide. This summarizes the refunding opportunity of the 2010C full-term certificates of participation. You'll notice a lot of the assumptions are similar. We're also doing a current refunding. This issue was callable on February 1st of 2019. If I move down to the additional facts, you'll notice total borrowing amount $2,730,000 for this debt issuance, with a total estimated savings of $108,000, round figure. Some of you may wonder, what's the impetus for moving forward with this debt issue at this time? The reason being, since you're issuing, assuming you issue the full-term certificates that refund the BAB issue, there's some efficiencies that can be gained in doing this potential refunding at the same time. And that, for example, one of those would be the Moody's rating fee would be significantly less if you move forward with the rating at the same time as you're doing another debt issuance. So the costs of issuance associated with the borrowing are more efficient to do at the same time as the larger refunding issue. So you can see estimated savings $108,000. Once again, exchanging the higher interest rates that can be seen in the bar graph to the right in gray for the lower rates in blue. If we look at the bar graph on the left, not extending the maturity, just simply exchanging the higher old rates for the new lower rates, which we can see below the right graph, again, range from 2.2% to 2.9%, and exchanging out for 3% to 4% for the existing 2010C issue. Any questions before I move on? Last slide here references the refunding that would restructure to add some stability and flexibility to the district's annual general fund, which goes back to the second slide that showed your certificates of participation, which are payable from your general fund. If we start with the bar graph, you'll notice the red bars here are the payments for the 2009B certificates of participation after refinancing and restructuring. You'll notice the green and the purple bars below that are the 2010D and 2012B certificates of participation that are payable from general fund. Those would stay intact and not be affected directly with the refunding. We would only be looking at refunding the 2009 B as in boy certificates. Excuse me. If we look at the black line that goes across from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 30 and then drops drastically, that's the payment structure that would line up to the second slide that I alluded to for the existing payments for the district's certificates payable from general fund. So essentially, with the restructuring, we're extending the payments on the 2009 B as in boy issue from fiscal year 30 to 2036. So extending the term 6 years. You'll notice this 2036 maturity or payment is much smaller depending on market conditions. If interest rates decrease, we may be able to get rid of this 2036 payment altogether and extend 5 years. The way current rates sit, we need to have that small payment in 2036 to generate, if I focus to the refunding restructuring goal, you'll notice the first bullet point there is the free up $700,000 annually in the district's general fund. That's the space, that $700,000 can be seen in the space between the top of the red bar and the black bar, moving left to right out to fiscal year 2030. So essentially from fiscal year 2020 to 2030, for 10 years, you have an additional $700,000 annually to work with in your general fund by restructuring the debt in this manner. In order to do this, if we look at the additional facts section in the bottom left portion of the slide, total borrowing amount $23,745,000 is estimated. Cost of issuance would be about $264,000. The net present value savings in today's dollars, taking into account time value of money, -2%. If we look at what that is in a dollar figure, it's about $493,000 negative net present value savings to restructure and get the $700,000 annually to add stability to the general fund.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is the cost of the issuing the debt already included in the amounts of savings?
Yes,
or is that on top of it?
No, the cost would be, the $700,000 would be the cost that you realize after taking into account the cost of issuance that would be paid for the bond. So yes, it's taken into account. Great question.
Thanks. Can you clarify, are there 2 different or 3 different options here between refunding and restructuring, or is it one suggestion that is encompassed in the last page that is both a refunding and a restructuring?
The last page would be a suggested option to restructure to generate the $700,000 of general fund savings.
So that's just the single suggestion?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that could be modified up or down depending on preference. This $700,000 was come up with in conversations with Kathy Erickson as well as Superintendent Gronseth as a starting point.
Okay, so that was the objective of your work here, to find a structure that would get us to that $700,000 a year savings.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So I don't then really understand how this, is it the 3rd page fits in, I think it's 4th, with the current refunding of 2009A. I guess I don't see why there's a savings of 2.97% here, but then at the end it's a negative. I don't get that.
Great question. Yes. So if we focus on the 2009A slide, which would be the 4th page in my handout, this refunding is going to affect the 2009A, let me backtrack. The 2009A full-term certificates are payable from tax levy on an annual basis. With this refunding, we're not looking at restructuring. We're focusing solely on refunding for interest cost savings to the district, where you're saving 1.6 million of future value or total gross savings, or just shy of the 3% net present value. So think of this as two different funding buckets of the 2009A versus the 2009B issue that's being summarized on the final page.
And they combine to create, or is it totally separate?
It would be totally separate.
So we could do this 2009A and save ourselves 2.97%.
Exactly.
And not do the other portion that would extend us out and cost us more in the long run.
You could, yes. Under that scenario, you would be forgoing, if we can go to the last slide, by doing the refunding for savings for the 2009A BAB, taxpayers would be realizing the savings on the debt service levy for that issue. What the district would be missing out on by not restructuring would be the $700,000 that's being saved in the general fund annually for the 10 years.
Right.
Correct.
The savings in the short term, but the greater cost and the greater time in the long run.
Correct, yes. There is a trade-off to get the $700,000. It does
certainly
cost the district money to the tune of $500,000 net present value. If that was looked at on a gross, it would be about $4.4 million.
Yeah.
Future value savings.
Yep.
My question, and I think you just started to answer it.
Okay.
The total cost of doing the extension, and then it seemed like the total savings for the other two pieces. You understand what I'm saying? So, how much does do the first two save, and how much does the last one cost?
Great question. Yep. So if we go to the 2009A refunding summary, this would save right now estimated 1.6 million. The $1,616,636 based on current rates. If we go to the next slide, would be 108,000. So we'll call it 1,716,000 round figures between the two. For the restructuring on the last page, to extend the payments out another 6 years, would be about $4,346,000 in additional debt service over the life of the borrowing. On a present value basis, in today's dollars, would equate to about $493,000.
Are you okay with that? All right. I have two questions. You had said something about the Moody's rating being quoted at Baa2, but it was supposed to be Baa1.
Mm-hmm.
Did our rating go up? Because I thought Moody's rating was the lowest possible.
You did get a rating change. I want to say within the last 2 years, within the last 2 to 3 years, the districts where I made the mistake in writing the BA2 versus the BA1 is the district's full-term certificates and general obligation debt is a BA1 rating, where the general fund certificates are rated at a BA2 or one notch lower. So that was my fault.
Thank you for that clarification. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the 2010C analysis and seeing that it will generate us $107,000 in savings, but it's going to cost $52,000. I mean, is that really a savings to, I mean, we're not talking like a bunch of money. So how, if we didn't choose to do this one, would that be reflected in the amount of savings in that 700,000? How much less would that be if we chose to pass the 700,000 but not this?
Keep in mind the 700,000 that's being summarized on the last page is a different bucket of money.
Right, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Kind of tough to compare apples to apples there. The 700,000 would be a standalone since that's payable from general fund, where the 2010C is payable from tax levy. To your point about the 50,000 of cost of issuance of debt, the 108,000 would be net of that. So it would be a true 108,000 of savings, not the 108,000 less the 52.
Correct, but that's to pay a third of what we get. That's harsh, I think. I have to wrestle with that. It doesn't seem worth it, but I would need, I guess I can ask, you're here, so I need to hear more about why it's worth it to, besides, you know, saving in costs of the Moody's rating and things. What does doing this get us in the end financially? It saves the taxpayers, obviously, but
correct.
If it's only saving us $100,000, that's not even a penny a household, I think. So it's tough for me to understand. Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm rambling,
I understand. I understand where you're coming from. In a sense, what you would get would be, you know, the 10 to 12,000 of annual savings on the debt service levy. I wanted to bring it forward to the school board at this time to let you know that this is an option.
Okay.
If you move forward with the 2009A refunding, it may make sense to take advantage, although it's not large savings, would take advantage of some savings to the taxpayer to take advantage of the efficiencies associated with doing the 2010C and 2009A refunding at the same time.
I get it. And I guess what I'm saying is it seems like a big paycheck for your company compared to the savings that we get. And that's just the cost of doing business as I understand it anyway. Member Sandsted, go right ahead.
Appreciate your question, your clarification of the issue. Member Oswald. I wanted to just follow up. Then you said that there may be, if we did both 2009 and 2009A and 2010C at the same time, there may be some efficiencies. So I guess before I get to that, actually, though, is looking at 2010C, the savings of 108, 135 is before the cost of issuing the debt. Or is that after? That
would be after. So the 108,000 would be total savings that the school district would realize. So after paying the 50,000 of cost of issuance.
Okay. Great. And so if we do these together, our savings are potentially the 1.6 plus the 108,000.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that the first one, the 1.6 million, is the one that we'd been looking at last spring, I believe it was, where we were considering around $1 million, and then when things came to pass, the market changed and it was around half that, and so now the market has improved, and so that's why we were initially bringing this back to you. The one for 108,000, you know, if it were a standalone, we wouldn't be looking at it. But if you're going to do the first one, you might as well do the second one because it's just a little bit more savings without that cost. Those first two, as Matt was saying, affect the levy. So that's savings to the taxpayer. It doesn't affect our general fund budget, or, you know, that's not money that we would be able to invest in other ways. That's savings that goes directly to the taxpayer. The final piece, the extension, is a way to
increase the amount of general fund that we're able to spend each year, although it extends it for 6 years, the 6th year being a much lower amount. And so it's a way of kind of stabilizing us over time. We thought that the savings from one more than paid for the second, although you're talking about 2 different buckets of money. I just wanted to add a little more context to why we're looking at those and why this is coming back to you to look at again.
I'd just like to, kind of piggyback too. It's a good conversation. Is there a potential that if we do the extension of our debt to out to 2036, that if things turn in our district over the last 10 years, so it's attractive for me personally. I can relate this to our own personal income, to refinancing, and to sometimes we families come across tough times, and we look at how we can refinance things. Our community, our society does that all the time. I see this as no different. So if our district can get ourselves through some really lean times, but my question too, so I like the idea of extending to give us this general fund boost, because I think that I don't see the reason we're in financial ruin is because we have as a district done something terrible. I think we have been struggling with unfunded mandates. I think we've been struggling with, just a decrease in enrollment that doesn't have anything to do with the things that we're doing wrong in our district, just is our population, and it's just our community. And so for us to think about using this ability to get us through some tough times, my question is if funding comes back, if legislators give us a boost in general fund money, if SPED Ed is funded at the level it should be, is there a way then we can pay this off sooner? And so that we'd realize the $700,000 in our annually into our general fund right now, which would really help us through a lot of issues. And then when enrollment increases, when funding by our legislators and our states go up, can you pay that off sooner?
Great question. Yes, the school district would have the ability to pay the certificates off prior to maturity, unlike a home mortgage, which in most cases can be refinanced at any point in the duration of your payments. For certificate issuances, bondholders require a certain time period in which to wait until you can refinance the certificates. Typically, we see that 6 to 9 years is kind of the industry standard. So within 6 to 9 years, somewhere on that time frame, the district would have the ability to pay the certificates off early.
Member Sandstead?
Yeah, looking at just our general, last page there of our, so these are just some of our debt in terms of our, there isn't an overview here of all of the debt payments we're making as a district. Or is that the third page, the debt side? That's just levy, right? The more colorful page, this.
So yes, the last page summarizes the debt picture before and after the restructuring for the district's debt that's payable from general fund.
I guess my question really is, does the last page encompass all of does this represent all of our debt from the long-term facilities plan?
No, ma'am, it wouldn't. That would be included on the third page that has the title Debt Levy Side of Budget. So your long-term facilities debt would be it's a little tough to see with a smaller font on the screen, but it's the bottom one in the left corner there, the taxable GO facilities maintenance bonds would be the facilities maintenance debt.
Say that again.
For that.
Which color?
The light blue. So it's going to be the top bar moving left to right from 17 to 2021 taxes payable year. The top light blue bar would be the facilities maintenance issue that was done in 2017.
Okay, no, I'm not asking that. I'm wondering if looking at our general debt payments, if they are representative of that debt that came out of the long-term facilities plan, generally speaking, from the era of, 2008, 7, 8, 9. They've been refunded, but is this representative of just debt from the long-term facilities plan as it currently stands to be paid off?
So there's two sides to it. There's the part that's paid with levy, and there's the part that's paid with general fund.
Yes.
They're on separate pages.
Okay, so you have to combine both. I'm going to just number these. Page 3.
So the third page shows what's paid out of levy. The last page shows what's paid out of general fund.
6. 3 and 6. Okay.
Correct. And if you wanted to see the general fund prior to refunding, would be on what should be titled as page 2, the general fund COPS. So if you combine page 2 and page 3, you would have the total debt of the district's facilities plan.
As it stands now.
Correct.
Without any changes. Okay. So that, just to get the fundamental understanding that right now we are locked in to continue paying debt on facilities that are now a decade old until 2031, 2029 being the bulk of it, although a lot of it drops off after 2027. So in my mind, I'm going to consider this just in terms of, it's a short-term, sounds really good to have another $700,000 in our general fund, but I also think that we have the responsibility of looking at when we might need facilities for more early childhood programming, or voluntary pre-K across the district, or whatever the case is. I think that we need to consider when we might be going out to borrow more money for facilities in making a decision that will have a 16, 17-year impact. So I just wanted to make that observation.
I just want to point out to board members we have 10 minutes to get through the rest of our agenda, including the budget discussion. So I'd like to wrap this up, if at all possible, or get your questions in now.
Can we just clarify then what will be on the agenda for the meeting next week from this? Is there going to be a recommendation? Options?
There will be a recommendation, and you would always have the option of changing that recommendation once you got there. I did want to point out one thing, that the levy side would still be done at 2027. So as far as tax impact, that would still end at 2027. And if at that time we needed to do some work, then that whole levy would be falling off.
Unless you have any closing comments, I think we're ready to move on.
I would add quickly,
Sure.
I've been in contact with Bob Topty from Freiberger Law Firm, where if the school board does make the decision to move forward with one or all of the refinancing options, the resolutions to start that process are drafted and ready for consideration at next Tuesday's school board meeting.
Thank you very much. It's a lot to ponder.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna breeze through this. I think we're not gonna hit anything unless you guys have something something highly pressing because we have a quote for district chillers. Anybody care to elaborate on that quote? No. All right. We have the conversation about the conflict of interest and fiduciary duty that was postponed till this month. I would recommend that we make a recommendation to postpone it another month because we can't delve into that topic.
I'm okay with that.
So I would like to consider that. We'd probably still have to vote to postpone it again at the meeting. Contracts, we want to buy some at least purchase vehicles for our dry red program. I think that's pretty standard. We're accepting donations. Then there's the resolutions to consider for refunding. Did we have anything about the placeholder of sale of property?
I wish.
Superintendent wishes. I bet to say the whole board does too. Expenditure contracts and no-cost contracts. I think if anybody has any questions, we can ask those individually. And the revenue contracts. Facilities management and capital project status report. Is there a highlight, or do you just want people to come to you with questions?
I think people could read the report, and if they have questions, feel free to contact me at any time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spooner.
Before we pass that up, though,
yep.
If there are questions, sometimes I would like to know that there's going to be one in case it's a question that then causes us to rethink. So okay. I know that's probably, you don't send an email to all of us, but I looked at it. I didn't see anything that struck out, but just a comment to my board members that, yeah.
I guess the only comment that I would like to make is we had a break week this past month, and I need to especially thank all the facilities operations, facilities maintenance, and tradespeople for the extra work they did in snow removal, even though it's warm today, rainy a little bit, but the past month was cold, and we've accumulated a lot of snow, and we haven't had much melting, so we've had hazards at buildings, sight lines, snow piles that kids are playing on, and we spent a lot of time during that break week of pushing piles back, of removing, trucking. It's expensive, but it's something we have to do to keep our students, staff, general public safe. So big thank you to all the facilities maintenance and operations people.
Thank you. We love our facilities and maintenance people because they make the snow go away before our employees show up. So I do have to give a shout out to our CFO, who has commented that she needs that policy that we wanted to delay. So I'm asking that we have our productive discussion at the board meeting and make any necessary changes there to vote on, if that's possible. The 307. Yes, the conflict of interest policy. I guess it's an immediate need. So I think we should come prepared to discuss that there and add a little more time when we have it.
And we don't have much, but I do know that if it helps you, because I know we had this conversation, I'm kind of in favor of conflict of interest policy, nepotism policy. And so if it looks like if you keep in the back of the mind that Tim Swirsky had said he would craft a nepotism policy to look at, and he had some samples for us that you can get, but if we can look at the conflict of interest and see that maybe that does contain as much as we need in that, because his recommendation was a separate policy. And as I looked at other school districts, they have separate policies on it. So just for our discussion next week.
Mr. Gorham, we have about 4.5 minutes.
I'll be 20 seconds. So now I'm giggling. As Member Lophold said, I think the discussion in HR committee was good, and I see no reason we can't just, if we're generally feeling pretty good about this policy, adopt it and amend it later if we feel we need to make modifications to it. So.
Mr. Swirsky looks like he's got something to say. Make it 20 seconds, sir.
I just wanted to add, Member Sandstead had made a recommendation, and even though we were looking maybe at nepotism then, I think it's a good recommendation to put into the conflict of interest policy, and we would like to do that then if we're going to bring it forward.
Thank you. Member Sandstead, do you have anything?
Well, that certainly works for me. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. I'm just going to say that Denfeld had some auto auctions and got some money. It does not look like we're going to have the even year election update discussion, which is problematic. So I would hope that we just elect to make that an open meeting in case we all decide to come, and or whoever decides to come and express their opinions there. And so we're finally at budget with 3 minutes to go. Peggy, you're in the hot seat.
This is a preliminary. We had promised the board that we'd be bringing considerations for the fiscal year 20 budget. And so these are the things that we know at this time. The amounts that you see in red are funds that we know are going to be happening. As far as we're predicting a slight decline in pupil enrollment. We know for sure our compensatory revenue has gone down. We know we have contractual obligations for increases to salaries. And so the parts that we don't know are the special education funding. We don't know the exact dollar amount. They do have an increase built into the formula. We're just not sure right now what that time is, the dollar amount. There is discussion at the legislature regarding increases to the formula. Different amounts have been proposed, so we don't know the dollar amount of that. And then the referendum revenue has been predicted to be about $5 million, and so what the uses of that are right now, we're still discussing.
Questions? Comments, Mr. Superintendent? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more. Working with Kathy, we're pretty fortunate, and Peggy has experience in Duluth, and Kathy has experience in 31 districts over the last however many years, 13 years. Sorry, Kathy, if that's the wrong number. And talking about budget and budget timing, learning more about, in Duluth, we've always tried to do preliminary budgets far in advance. And what we know is those are our best estimates, especially on a legislative year when there is so much conversation about so many different formulas. And so sometimes we'd put out a preliminary budget and not really know if those were the numbers yet. And then there's a reaction to that. There's, what are we going to do? Angst. and then some more numbers come out and we revise, and then there's a reaction, and then the final numbers come out and say, okay, this is really where we are, and sometimes there's even changes after that. So in this case, we're showing you what we know at this point for sure, instead of trying to guess or predict or estimate where we are. As the legislative session moves along, as we get more numbers, we'll be able to fill this in a little bit more and provide you with real-time data rather than trying to make those predictions. So we do have a committee of the whole scheduled for March 26th where we'll discuss a bit more about the budget, but for now this is kind of what we know.
I really appreciate the here's what we actually know and here's what we don't know, and if you keep us posted with that, I don't mind that at all, not going ahead and making formal decisions until we have enough information to move forward.
I too am happy that there's some things we know, and have some hope held out in the things that we don't. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. I apologize to any community members that expected something different, but this is what we got and what we know. So in the last few seconds that we're supposed to be adjourned, I just request that maybe in the future we change the meeting dates on election day since we know when they are. So with that, I'll conclude the business committee.